joining today. Thank you for being with us for this UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities webinar titled Cities in Emergencies, Safeguarding Lifelong Learning. My name is Alex and I am here representing the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities, and it's my pleasure to moderate today's session. Across the world, cities are on the front line of emergencies. These are not abstract challenges or temporary disruptions. They are situations of war, forced displacement, natural disasters, and persistent urban violence that directly affect people's lives, safety, and futures. In these contexts, access to learning is often severely disrupted or at risk of collapse. Yet at the same time, it becomes even more essential, supporting continuity, stability, protection, and the capacity of individuals and communities to respond and recover. Cities are central actors in this reality. They are often the first to respond, the closest to affected communities, and the ones adapting systems under pressure to ensure that learning continues. Today's webinar focuses on how cities are doing exactly that, safeguarding learning in the most challenging circumstances. Let me begin with a quick overview of today's agenda. We will start with a presentation from UNESCO, setting the global and institutional context for education in emergencies. From there, we move to our expert speaker, Dr. Joe Kelsey, who will offer a broader perspective on cities in emergency contexts, including migration and displacement, and the role of local actors in sustaining learning systems under pressure. We then turn to city experiences from different emergency contexts. Kharkiv, Ukraine, on sustaining education and learning during war. Hatay, Turkey, on responding to the aftermath of a major earthquake and rebuilding learning systems. And General Escobedo, Mexico, on addressing urban violence and strengthening community resilience through lifelong learning. We will close with a discussion and a question and answer session. We do have a very full program today, so I would kindly ask that all speakers respect their allotted speaking time so that we do have a little bit of time at the end for discussion. Just a few technical points. First of all, the webinar is being recorded and will later be made available through the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning website. Secondly, we do warmly invite you to use the chat box to introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining from. I see that many of you are doing that already. And if you have questions for our speakers, whether for individual speakers or for all, please use the Q&A box. We will do our best to address as many of your questions as possible during the discussion segment at the end. And finally, we're very fortunate to have interpretation available today in many different languages, in Arabic, French, Spanish, Chinese, and Korean. We'd like to sincerely thank our partners supporting interpretation. Chinese interpretation is being provided by Shanghai Municipal Institute for Lifelong Education in the People's Republic of China. Arabic interpretation is provided by the Regional Centre of Quality and Excellence, RCQE, under the auspices of UNESCO, located in Jubail, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And Korean interpretation is supported by the UNESCO Learning Cities, Unpyeong and Nonsan in the Republic of Korea. So our sincere thanks to all partners and interpreters for helping make this event accessible to a wider audience. To begin, it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Min Chang, Project Officer for Education in Emergencies at UNESCO. Ms. Chang will present UNESCO's work on education in emergencies and highlight how this connects to the role of cities. Ms. Chang, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to participants joining from different time zones. And many thanks for this invitation to speak at this webinar for a very important discussion. On behalf of the section, I will briefly present UNESCO work in education emergencies, which is a critical critical area that ensures the learning continues even in the most challenging context. So I will start with UNESCO's overall approach and followed by key areas of actions, and then two country examples, Ukraine and Gaza, and then one flagship initiative on the UNESCO qualifications passport. So UNESCO's approach to education emergencies is built around six key areas of actions. All aimed at protecting the right to education during crisis. We use a whole hazard or risk approach, addressing overlapping crises such as conflict, climate change, climate event, and displacement. And the work spans all phases of crisis, before, during, and after, with a strong focus on long-term system resilience. As reflected in the Camembert chart, we monitor and assess the education system in emergency context to understand the needs. We provide a continuity of learning and a safe and inclusive environment for all levels of education. We also support skills development for youth to strengthen their resilience and sustainable livelihoods. We also provide teacher trainings who are at the teacher trainings, teachers who are at the front line, responders supporting both learning and well-being. In other contexts, we also support rehabilitations and reconstructions of education infrastructures. And finally, we provide education system strengthenings. So the systems are prepared and resilient to the future shocks. Now let's move to quickly the case studies. So to start with, in Ukraine, in country, UNESCO has focused on both immediate response and also long-term recovery to ensure the continuity of learning. Over 16,000 Chromebooks were distributed to teachers and students. Teacher support has been critical. More than 15,000 teachers have been trained in mental health and psychosocial support, and a large community of practice has been established. UNESCO has also supported the well-being of over 116,000 children and adolescents. As for infrastructures, around 50 education facilities have been rehabilitated, including schools and early childhood care centers. Looking ahead, efforts and priorities are focused on strengthening national system for mental health support, improving inclusion of vulnerable children, including those with disabilities, and also enhancing diagnostic and support services for children affected by trauma. And another example is Gaza. In Gaza, UNESCO's work addresses serious disruptions to education systems. One key area is monetary damage, especially in higher education. To support the learners, UNESCO has delivered mental health and psychological support to children and caregivers, and provided tools to schools for the implementation of MHSPSS as well. A major initiative is in Gaza Virtual Campus, designed to help students continue their university studies remotely. So far, 20,000 students have been reached, with plan to expand further. UNESCO is also supporting early grade learning, reaching 32,000 students, training teachers in social and emotional learnings, expanding access to safe and inclusive learning environments, especially in technical and vocational education. Overall, the goal is not just a recovery, but also to build back better through stronger system and enhanced coordination mechanism with the national education actors. A flagship initiative on UNESCO qualifications passport, which is a recognition tool that supports the recognition of superior learnings for the displaced populations and including refugees. So since its pilot phase in 2019 has been expanded across multi-countries and regions, the initiative helps for small displaced populations, including refugees, as mentioned, to have their qualifications and prior learning recognized when lack of documentations, and also to facilitate their access to education and employment opportunities. Looking ahead to 2026, priorities include address access issues through systematic approaches, strengthen collaborations with higher education institutions, for instance, collaborations with Global University Academy, provide education recognition system strengthening through comprehensive capacity building programs, which we're currently collaborating with UIL, provide comprehensive training through theoretical, practical, and case studies of policy mitigations. We shall also support the upskilling of the recognition scope to regulated professions, such as teaching professionals among the refugee populations, as one of the response to the refugee teacher shortage issues. And finally, we hope to further empowering youth through this UNESCO Qualifications Passport alumni network. So to conclude, UNESCO's work in education emergencies is more than just access. It focuses also on continuity, protection, and resilience, and by supporting learners, teachers, as well as the education system to ensure that education remains as a lifeline during crisis, as a foundation for recovery and future stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chang, for outlining UNESCO's work and setting the framework for today's discussion. So we'll now move to a broader analytical perspective on cities in emergency contexts. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jo Kelsey, who will share insights from her work. Jo, the floor is yours. Please, no more than 8 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks also for convening. This is a really important topic, and I will kind of echo, I think, some of what has been said before. I'm actually based in Beirut, so this is also a very kind of live discussion for me. I'm dealing with online learning and online work and lots of horrible things that are happening around the city. And it's a reminder that it's really at the level of cities that we have to tackle many of the major challenges that we face in emergencies. If we could move to the next slide, please. So I wanted to start just by going over some of the sort of broad challenges to frame what we're going to be talking about. Now, I think, obviously one of the main challenges that we face in crisis contexts is the issue of displacement. If I think about the context that I'm in, we're talking about displacement both within the city, within the municipal boundaries, and also into the city. So because cities have services, because this is where people's livelihoods in terms of work opportunities are located, we see a kind of double challenge in terms of displacement, both within and into cities. And it's municipal authorities that end up being the frontline responders in these cases. And so I've done a lot of work over the years thinking about policy, thinking about strengthening global platforms. But when we actually talk about what's happening on the ground, it's at the level of the municipalities that we have to be responding. And so being able to translate some of these strategies and policies into local responses that people can actually activate is really key. And I think this is sort of where we need to be thinking and sharing lessons and opportunities. The other major thing I wanted to kind of stress on is that cities are learning ecosystems. So it's not just about formal schooling, it's about everything that has to do with learning. So we have institutes of higher education where people also come from outside cities. We have to think about students transitioning between these levels. We also need to think about spaces like museums, libraries that also support learning, as well as many, many other kind of learning opportunities, for example, training and different internship opportunities that help people integrate into work. And of course, we need to think about challenges related to how overstretched services are. I just got bumped off because our internet is being really overloaded at the moment because of all the people in the city who are having to rely on it for different issues. Fortunately, I'm back, but it's a reminder of how these things go. And then I think the other thing to stress is that cities are often places, as much as they can be places of opportunities, they can also be places of great inequality. And so anytime we think about responding, we need to think about doing so in equitable ways. Next slide, please. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about why lifelong learning approaches are really the best framing for thinking about this, with a particular reference to thinking about displacement. So I consider lifelong learning to be really the kind of cornerstone of a resilient response. And in thinking about resilience, we need to think about not just kind of at the level of the individual and how individuals cope. We can certainly think about skills and competencies that help us to cope in very difficult situations. But we also need to be thinking about the community, the types of relationships that can be very, very supportive, access to services. And we need to also be thinking about the systems level and how things relate to each other. Where do we have complementarity? Where do we have gaps? And I think what a lifelong learning approach really does, that's really important, is it actually forces us to think much more broadly. It forces us to think in this kind of systems way. And so, that is good both in terms of thinking about learning for education, but also thinking about how education can enable other rights and other needs during times of emergencies. One of the challenges we have, for example, here in Beirut, and it's not just here, is that many schools are serving as shelters for displaced people. Now we have other platforms people might be able to access to continue learning, but we need to kind of think about what works and what doesn't work within the system as a whole. And we've had examples of sort of institutes of higher education that have been going out and helping people, medical schools where people are going and visiting people in displaced areas, but also campuses of universities giving over space to schools because those schools are in turn serving as shelters for people. Next slide, please. So in terms of thinking about the particular role of local government and municipalities, I mean, there are many ways that we need to think about localizing these global and national policies. We need to sort of maintain, but also expand access to education. And maintaining is very difficult when you don't always know where people are and people don't know where they're going to be. And then expanding because many people do come into municipal areas in times of crisis. Coordination, it's at the level of cities often that it makes the most sense to map needs, to align services and to identify gaps. We can certainly talk about the provisions needed to do that, but it's very much at that local level that we do it. And we also need to be kind of doing a bunch of different services that facilitate and support learners, like recognizing, as we just heard about, recognizing previous learning, making services very accessible, and in some cases, streamlining bureaucracy to make sure that people can access these things with minimal delay and that we keep the continuity going. Next slide, please. So I think lifelong learning approaches can really help because in addition to thinking sort of systemically, they also force us to think about holistic outcomes. Now, we want to think about providing education in ways that certainly support the nuts and bolts academic learning, but that also promote other things that are extremely important during times of crisis. As I mentioned, inequalities can sometimes be exacerbated in these moments. So we want to think about promoting social inclusion. So activities that bring people together, displaced communities as well as host communities. We need to think certainly about psychosocial well-being and making sure people can access, sometimes that's medicalized services, sometimes it's the routine, normalcy, structure, and safe spaces that can be provided within these contexts. And then we need to think about resilience. And this is where I like to kind of think about lifelong learning as a framework, not just to promote learning and a continuity of learning, but also that it's reflected within the systems and the interventions that we create, so that we also have systems that can learn. And that sort of from, unfortunately, sometimes crisis happens not just once or twice, but it can be protracted and continual. So that's the case here. And what we see is a lot of learning from previous crises. Next slide, please. So you're going to hear about some really amazing, I think, lessons that we have from all around the world. And I don't want to take time away from those. I think I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things I've come across in my work that I think are really interesting ways of thinking about this. There are lots of really interesting volunteer initiatives that you see activated in cities that bring together, for example, students in the higher education sector to support school children through tutoring and mentoring and creating those kind of really important relationships that can really support and foster resilience. But we can also think about examples more at the level of strategy and policy. So I've done quite a lot of work in relation to Palestine. There's some really interesting work that's been happening in Ramallah recently around planning for resilience. And I think that is interesting because it shows you the importance of taking a long-term perspective, and it's also dedicating resources, both time, if we think about planning, but also the kind of material resources and the human resources that are required to embed this within systems. I've come across some really interesting work also in Iraqi Kurdistan with policies that really focus on education integration. So thinking about training teachers to receive displaced students into classrooms and also helping displaced students identify opportunities within higher education. And in another context that I've always been very interested in is Colombia. I think they're one of the forerunners in thinking about responsiveness at the municipal level. And there's some really interesting examples from Bogota and Medellin, where you see that they've really embedded not just sort of education interventions, but the ethos of a lifelong learning approach into their urban transformation projects. So I want to leave it there because I think there are lots of really interesting examples to hear from, but thanks for having me, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kelsey. Thank you for providing us with an analytical lens through which we can view this topic, as well as for highlighting both the scale of the challenge and the critical role of cities, as well as a few promising practices. So we'll now turn to the city level, where these challenges are being addressed in a real context, often extremely difficult conditions. And we'll start with the city of Kharkiv in Ukraine, a city that continues to operate under the conditions of war. And despite ongoing risks and disruption, the city has worked to maintain access to education and learning for its population. And so I would invite the Learning City representative from Kharkiv to share the city's experience. You have 5 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Oleg Tovkun. I work for Mayor's Office as a Deputy Director of the Department of International Cooperation. First of all, I would like to pass the warmest greetings from hero city of Kharkiv and say the big thank you for this provided opportunity to share some insight information about the contemporary Kharkiv today. And I would like just to start out with a modicum of information about the city of Kharkiv. So Kharkiv is one of the Ukrainian's most prominent cities, founded in 1654. It quickly became an important commercial and educational center. Over the last century, Kharkiv has remained Ukrainian student capital, the center of the country's intellectual, artistic, and scientific life, covering an area of approximately 350 square kilometers. Until 2022, Kharkiv was the second most populous city in Ukraine, with over 1.4 million inhabitants, and accounted for about 6% of Ukrainians' gross domestic product. Above, you can view the horrible pictures of the things that Kharkiv has suffered. Since 24 February 24, 2022, Kharkiv has been one of the first cities to come under mass Russian attack and remains in constant danger up to this day. Almost every day, soldiers and civilians are losing their lives. The price for resistance and resilience is very, very high. Over the years of full-scale war, over 12,000 buildings have been damaged, including more than 400 cultural heritage sites, residential buildings, school kindergartens, cultural institutions, critical infrastructure facilities, administrative and commercial premises. These are another pictures about these horrible events. Just a couple of minutes of your attention. In response to the constant threat of drone onslaughts and various bombardments, a unique project has been implemented in Kharkiv, implying construction of metro schools, educational facilities where educational processes is conducted on the basis of Kharkiv metro stations, which in turn serves as reliable shelters. This solution made it possible to partially return children to face-to-face learning in conditions of martial law, while ensuring a high level of safety. The spaces have been equipped with fully fledged classrooms with furniture, lighting, internet connection, and the necessary technical equipment. Metro schools have become a prime example of the adaptability of the urban education system, which even for the circumstances of frontline city is capable of adapting innovative solutions to make the community and continuity and quality of education a reality. In Kharkiv, under the constant threat of missile strikes, a groundbreaking project is being implemented to create fully fledged underground schools. This is another form of educational facilities. Specially designed educational spaces located below ground level and equipped as protective structures. These facilities combine the function of a safe shelter and modern learning environment. They feature classrooms, ventilation systems, autonomous power supply, internet, sanitary facilities, and conditions for children and teachers to say, all in all, quite friendly and educational environment. The school employs qualified psychologists whom children and their parents can turn for professional support and advice. In addition, each school has special classrooms for teaching children with special educational needs. So these are called resource rooms. The creation of underground schools was both a strategic and bold decision to ensure stable face-to-face learning despite the most unfavorable conditions, demonstrating the authorities' responsibility to involved and feel safe and secure and ensure the continuity of the educational process. In 2024, the Kotlarevsky Kharkiv National University of Arts opened a unique UNESCO chair in the preservation of traditions in culture and arts. Despite the difficult conditions of the wartime, the activities of this chair demonstrate the resilience and continuity of lifelong education, proving that the development of culture, science, and international academic cooperation continues even now. In summary, Kharkiv's hard-earned experience convincingly demonstrates that even for a frontline city, continuous learning is the order of the day, being possible with strategic planning, quick management decisions, innovative approaches, and significantly due to the people whose everyday labor brings it into existence. Establishment of the metro schools and underground schools, the adaptation of the whole educational process to the contemporary challenges, as well as the systematic implementation of educational measures, are the key to lifelong learning. Our experience proves that education does not stop in times of crisis. It transforms, strengthens, and becomes the foundation of entire community resilience. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to the City of Kharkiv for this really important and powerful presentation. And the work you're doing is truly impressive, particularly trying to preserve children's education and doing what you can to ensure they don't suffer too much from something that is obviously not at all their fault.
Thank you.
So thank you for this. And now we'll turn to the city of Hatay in Türkiye, which was severely affected by a different type of emergency several years ago, affected by earthquakes, very severe earthquakes. And we'll hear from the city of Hatay in terms of how lifelong learning continued.
1 second. Hello, I am Burcu Yıldız from the Hatay Metropolitan Municipality as an officer in here. Today I will share you the story of the Hatay as city of the civilizations. It's a journey of the adaptation, resilience, and the construction following the devastating 2003 earthquake. Hatay is one of the most affected provinces during the February 6, 2003 earthquakes. The tremors lasted over a minute, causing catastrophic destruction and loss of the 10,000 lives, leading to massive recovery process. And however, the catastrophe we faced on February 6, 2003 presents us the one of the greatest challenges at the modern history. The greatest barriers in the minute earthquake, logistical isolations, the fracturing of the airport runway and the land space of the Belen Pass turned the Hatay into the virtual island. We implement a critical supply routes strategy using heavy machinery to access the before beginning the debris removal. And the communication breakdown. With the 8% of the base station failing, our IT teams from the government integrated the satellite internet and the VHF radio system into the hybrid network. These patch networks maintain the vital flow of the information between the decision makers and the debris removal for the saving the lives. Water infrastructure is most important to us because there's lots of infrastructure collapse. The city's water network fragmented at the thousand of the points, and the collaboration with the NGOs and governance, we installed the neighborhood-based water tanks and the mobile treatment units. This was our most critical resilience more effectively prevented outbreak epidemics. Social transformation and technical capacity. Resilience is about more than just infrastructure, and it's about the people. Education in the settlements, we provided the hygiene, fire safety, and the emergency protocols to residents via the educational tents and the social markets within the container settlements and also tent settlements. Economic and the self-sufficiency, we aim to transfer our local economy through the specific training and the digital trade and advancing construction for the business owners. With all the angles, they have the small business markets. Psychological growth, we conducted post-traumatic growth workshops for the women and the children by the instilling a sense of the cultural heritage stewardships to prevent artwork migration. But there's lots of migration because of there's no place to stay in the city. Lots of buildings collapse. Educational continuity is the most important to us, but we can do anything can do in these situations. We maintained the formal education, state-funded modular, and the container-based, as you can see in the picture. Container-based school were deployed for students in the temporary settlements. As you can see the difference between the 2003 and the 2006 in these years. This is not the rebuilding just the city, it's the rebirth of the city. Of course, the loss of people left their houses and lots of immigrate to the other provinces. So we hope to all the citizens come back again. Hatay is now emerging as a still more safer or more resilient new feature. Thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you very much to the city of Hatay. Thank you for also showing us how some of the destruction has been remedied through rebuilding, but as you say, there are long-term consequences, and it will take, I'm sure, many years for the city to fully recover. But clearly, a lot was done to make sure that social cohesion was maintained and towards rebuilding the city. So
Thank you.
Thank you for those insights. Then we will move to our third and final presentation from the city level. I would just like to remind you at this point to please post any questions you have in the Q&A. So you're more than welcome to add some comments to the chat, also mention where you're joining from. It's great to see such a global audience. If you have a specific question for any of the speakers or for all of the speakers, please use the Q&A. And before I introduce the next city, I would like to also mention that this presentation will be in Spanish. So please, if you would like to listen in English, please go to the interpretation button in Zoom, the globe icon, and select the English channel. If you're listening in another language, you don't need to change anything. So for our final city, our final example today, we're going to move to the city of General Escobedo in Mexico. And here the emergency takes a different but equally serious form, linked to persistent urban violence and the impact of violence on communities. So I would hand the floor then to our city representative. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hola, muy buenos días.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Yes, Escobedo is a very young city during the last 30 years of further exposition and growth. We are a city that belongs to the city of metropolitan area of Monterrey in the Mexican state of Nuevo León. We, like a city, our focus is industrial city. We are a city that works together with entrepreneurship, and in the entrepreneurial area that has resulted into a growth. We, in the year 2011, like the country of Mexico, we lived a hard situation of insecurity because of drug dealing. And narco was very affecting the security concerns. The narco was embedded in the police corporations and institutions, talking that the narco were operating with the police corporations on their side of the criminals. For us, like citizens, it was very difficult. Can you imagine that, for example, the narco were operating inside the cops institutions? This resulted into that many times the integrity of the public officers and of citizens to be involved in a lot of very difficult situations that were major Claudia Luz Flores had several attacks, a bomb in her house that was exploded outside her house of the mayor, and all with 12 different attacks. It was a very hard decision to use them in the national military in our municipality. So we wonder, like city, what do we have to do? What is needed to be done all along from the year 2011 to the year 2026? We've made different things with different indicators. Number one was to create a trust cup, to create this proximity police, a model that we followed by the city of Medellin, Colombia. We follow the pattern and the same experience focus, also with us following the example of Barcelona that had proved this management of proximity police. And it was the first format that we used with this frame, that it was a police body close to the citizen, that the police could know who the neighbors were, who the citizens were, the name and time and activities and daily lives, was to approach the police to the citizenship. So we, like a city, we noticed that we still needed more things to be done. We needed to do more things. We needed how to approach what was going on with the criminals, because still the criminal rates were very high. And it was this factory of criminals. So we decided to see the cause, to have this factory of criminals. The drug dealing and the narco had members and had a lot of strength in our municipality of Escobedo, with many indicators of family violence. And we could detect in a primary area. So we had to address with education, with a model of restorative justice, to give opportunity to these first criminals, to give them another chance of living and work. And we determined the model of justice that we learned from the US, to give the chance and possibility to these first attackers and to those first offenders, give them the chance to embed them in the educational system, to give them work and other chances. Then we kept following, what else do we need to do? How we can address this factory of criminals with this program of scholarships. We strengthen the part of educations. The first purple, the first purple campaign, that is a system that is included in several parts of the country of Mexico. This police of proximity that has scaled up at a national level with the new federal police of the federal government, is trained in Escobedo. The model of justice has scaled up to more than 200 different cities that have implemented this public policy, and that was born here in the municipality of Escobedo. Likewise, we had the possibility to participate in Learning Cities. It's a platform that allows the lifelong learning and that allows these changes of public policy. And we've learned that governance is improved when there's this exchange from city to city, this wonderful part that results into sharing, as we have done before, with the proximity police, with the model of the Purple campaign, with those programs that comes from Barcelona in Spain, that resulted in how Barcelona and other countries decrease this factory of criminals, so to speak. Escobedo now is a learning city because it exchanges public policy with other cities. We have implemented the Protocol 48, that is a protocol. It's the first protocol in Mexico for all those disappear in Mexico. Before, you need to wait 48 hours before speeding up a search program. We have the first this program that you can do it at the first minute when your relative has not arrived to your home. Then you can start looking and searching for that person in minutes. And this This has been a very good strategy for finding the lost individuals. We have made a lot of programs to improve our city. So far, 3 years ago, we have been a learning city. We have learned from city to city, and we believe that the governance is improved by these kind of platforms that allows this exchange of public policy. Escobedo is a resilient city with a model of government that is called the 4D, that is working with entrepreneurs, with the social capitalism, and that allows the improvement of the social tissue. You can understand the causes. We have 9,000 scholarship because we had a lot of school abandonment and school quitting, but now we have a lot of scholarship that we are given at a higher education levels. So we tried to address this school abandonment by 9,000 scholarships that we are given. That is to say that all the inhabitants of Escobedo from 15 to 19 years old are receiving a scholarship by the municipality government, besides the scholarship that they are receiving of the federal government, so as to prevent them from falling into criminal activities. I can also mention some other projects. This thing about the social tissue improvement, that is the first time that we are doing it at a municipality in Mexico country to address the improvement of the social tissue in a transversal way, where all the dependent institutions of the government that are doing the work on field have this vision of improving the social tissue. There's a project that is called From Neighbor to Neighbor, where the cooperation of citizens addresses in a time, manner, and directly the community whatever thing about abandonment, for example, of the elderly, of somebody who has a disease, and then the neighbors are addressing these situations. So it will go from the smallest to the largest part with the scholarships, providing this guarantee that the entrepreneur may rely that the resources are being well used with the scholarships, with infrastructure. We have the largest project of infrastructure at a municipal level, over 200 cultural activities, over 45 programs of non-formal educations in different educational centers. We also have a network with more than 40 schools that we have in our municipality, with universities that we host. So it is addressing with this closeness, with the reliable, and with this work team, not leaving behind any sectors. We believe that the additions of willing, the entrepreneurs, the economic, the social, in this triangle results into the city, keeps growing and improving in every concern. Besides this condition of resilience, we truly believe that after the chaos, after the destruction, comes a smart work. And this smart work is being made with indicators by measuring what the city is doing, and also we can learn of our experience, our governance, our way of doing the government. We truly believe that with the school neighborhoods, with those public spaces, after the COVID, public spaces were abandoned. So we modernized the infrastructure. We equipped the public spaces so as to be safe spaces for learning, and cultural centers and social programs that we can develop this peace culture in our municipality. We truly believe that with those cultural promoters, with institutional promoters to promote peace in the social part, it is how we can manage the important changes. We are constantly training our network of support to our neighbors, our allies, with the academic part, with this exchange from neighbor to neighbor. As we do this global exchange of right now, as we are doing it right now, we also believe that from neighbor to neighbor, if the neighbor and the citizen learns from another citizen the good things, somehow we can also make a great change in our country. We are a city that learns every day. We are a city that is open to receiving the learning from another cities. And from the year 2011 up to date, we have really tried to learn from another cities, and this has resulted in nowadays in not having the most conflicted community of Mexico.
Sorry to interrupt. We will need to wrap up, please, and move to the Q&A. Thank you. Would you like to conclude
Sí,
just with a sentence?
Sí, es con eso, es lo que creemos, realmente.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. That's what we think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to have a bit of time to cover some of the really interesting questions that are coming in. But thank you to General Escobedo for showing how lifelong learning can support prevention, inclusion, resilience in context of insecurity caused by violence and crime, which is also another form of emergency that many cities are facing. And I would like to thank the audience for the many questions and comments. So I know there's been a very active discussion in the chat. I'm going to focus on a few questions in the Q&A box because we won't have time to cover everything. But I'm going to ask two sets of two questions and then just hand over to all the speakers. You can add something if you wish. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But to start with, then two questions combined. So one was very specifically about disaster preparedness or preparations for emergencies before they happen. Do you have any very specific advice for how that can be maybe part of a curriculum or a learning effort within a city to make sure that the idea of a potential future emergency is something that is taken into account before it happens? And then part two, when in the situation of an emergency, is there anything really, really concrete that you would hope for from other members of the GNLC? So as a member of the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities, how can other members help you in the case of an emergency? So I'll just maybe open the floor to the speakers. You can address one of those points or any of them as you wish. Maybe Joe, would you have a reaction first?
Yeah, sure. I think I think preparedness is really key, right? And it's uncomfortable. No one wants to think about the coming crisis. But the only way that we can learn and adapt is to gather this information. And I think this is where we kind of need to be, historians in a way. I have a bias. I'm a historian of education, and we have many, many examples, right? So we need to, as part of a network, we need to share within the network, but we can also look back. I saw there was a few comments in the chat about, Gaza. Palestinians have 80 years of experience doing this, and we have different tools at our disposal now. We have online platforms. We have other ways and other modalities of thinking about continuity of learning, but we can also look back at what worked and what didn't work. And I think schools are doing this, whether that's public schools in many contexts. Now, the context I'm in, we have a very wide private sector, so we also need to go to those actors and see what they're doing. And then we need to diffuse that learning and bring people together to think about not just aggregating, but what schools are already doing, because they have to do this. They know they have to do this, and they want to keep learning going. But how then municipalities can also support that. So I think looking across different examples and also looking back in time is really important for that.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for highlighting the role of history as well, and that emergencies may be happening to some extent for the first time, but probably similar emergencies have occurred in the past, and what has been done. Hatay would like to add?
I just wanted to say something to I was in the Hatay at the earthquake with my family at my home. What they teach at the school, it's not working, and the crisis, that moment, you just start to save yourself. This is the basic thing for everybody, and you are safe. Then start to take care of your family, take care of your friends, and it is the most important thing I think at the school must teach the aid to the people. How can you save yourself? How can take care the others? And in that emergency time, you at the survivor mode. You you are running to the large areas, stadium or the parks. You started to take care the other people, and you started to search food. There's no food at that moment. So I think the municipalities and the other uh, countries must learn how to take care of yourself at the emergency situation, because we don't know. Just you put switch off the survival mode, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an important point. Thank you. Self-preservation, self-care, and then outwards to the family, the community.
Yes.
Actually, in the moment when things are very frightening. So thank you for highlighting that point. Are there any other responses to the questions I mentioned? Yep, Kharkiv.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to support the speakers and just add one more thing that given that we are not decision makers here in the city, and we cannot be responsible for the decisions for the overall Ukrainian government. This is very important to have skillful and competent mayor and the team that circles him, because actually we have had very harsh winter. We suffered several cuts of heating and power here, and it affected all walks of life in the city. And I think people living in cities, they think about and consider the people that they vote for, because it may affect and have a real impact in the future for them. Because I would never wish anyone to suffer and experience the things that we have experienced here. So just think about the government, local government, and local authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing us back to the importance of the local level and the power that municipal governments have, particularly if led very effectively. Thank you.
Right.
We have very little time left, unfortunately, and there are so many questions and really interesting reflections. And I do apologize that we won't be able to cover everything. But I'd like to thank everyone who's contributed to the Q&A and to the chat, and to the speakers as well, if you're able to read some of the comments. Hopefully we can continue discussions afterwards in one way or another. But maybe I'll just finish with one very quick question, because I think the first question we had in the Q&A was addressing the young people. And Joe, I think you mentioned earlier the role of university students tutoring children when school is disrupted and so on. So for young people facing emergencies that may seem imposed upon them or completely beyond their control, what can they do? What should they do? And how are they appreciated within the context of an emergency response? Joe?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because we talk a lot about innovation and it's really important, but it doesn't always mean doing something completely new, right? So the project I was thinking about in Lebanon is a project called Mumkin, and it was already running. It's been running before the crisis. And sometimes what we need to do is identify the assets that we have in a community and then think about how they can be applied. So this was a project that was started quite some time ago to help students in public schools by having university students tutor them. And then throughout the kind of successive crises that we've seen in Lebanon, It has, also helped to support a continuity of learning in the public sector, while also providing students with really important kind of relational support and mentoring. And I think one of the ways in which we can think about engaging young people is just get engaged, right? It doesn't have to be a crisis that gets you engaged. Think about all of the different civil society opportunities that exist or need to exist. And then should a crisis happen, and of course we hope it doesn't, it's really those community assets that will come to the fore and allow you to respond in ways that you didn't necessarily realize were possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Are there any then final additions before we close? There's so much more that we could talk about, but I just want to finish by highlighting that I think this discussion today signals somewhat of a shift in how we understand the role of cities within the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities. This is a relatively new topic for the GNLC, the idea of lifelong learning in emergencies, safeguarding lifelong learning, but it's obviously one that is going to be a rapidly growing area of focus because more and more member cities are unfortunately facing acute and prolonged emergencies, and so the network will need to evolve accordingly. It's strengthening knowledge exchange, not just through one-off webinars, but through regular, partnerships and exchanges. Also supporting peer learning, obviously, in terms of what you've tried, what's worked, what you've learnt from emergencies in your own context, and ensuring that lifelong learning contributes to local responses. So you will see, I think, in the next few months, and certainly over the course of the year, that we will place greater emphasis on this area of work. And we'll be developing also some tools that will hopefully be useful. And what we've seen today is that cities are not only responding to emergencies, but also developing approaches that can help other cities across the network. And this is really the strength of the UNESCO GNLC. So thank you once again to all speakers, all participants. Thank you to the interpreters and our partners who made interpretation possible. This has been a very serious but also very inspiring discussion. And we invite you to continue to follow this webinar series. It will happen every month this year. So the next one will take place in April, and you can find the schedule on our website. And once again, a big thank you to everybody, and do take care. Thank you.